Our speaker today is Stacy Small-Lorenz. I'm going to give her bio and then invite her to come on up here. She is the residential landscape ecology specialist at University of Maryland Extension, where she leads the Baywise 2.0 Maryland Living Landscapes program, which is focused on enhancing biodiversity, water quality, and climate resilience in Maryland watersheds in the Chesapeake Bay. With over 30 years in conservation science working across the U.S., she has called Maryland home for nearly 15 years. Stacy holds a PhD in biological sciences from the University of Missouri-Columbia and a BAS in ecology and photography from Yale University and the Evergreen State College. Her doctoral work involves studying songbird population response to riparian forest restoration in California's Sacramento River Valley. Professionally, she has engaged in all facets of wildlife habitat conservation, including restoration, applied research, education, and advocacy. She served as a restoration ecologist at River Partners in California and held senior science roles focused on wildlife habitat conservation at Washington, D.C.-based NGOs, Environmental Defense Fund, and the National Wildlife Federation. Her work includes leading publications like Natural Defenses in Action and Building Ecological Solutions to Coastal Community Hazards. Additionally, she has taught secondary science in Maryland public schools and enjoys nurturing her son's scientific and musical pursuits. A musician herself, she enjoys playing the violin in her free time, tending to her native plants, and engaging in outdoor activities such as birding, kayaking, and backcountry skiing. Thank you, Stacy, and take it away.
Well, thank you so much for being here this evening. I'm really excited to be here tonight to talk to you a little bit about Baywise 2.0 and expanding the role of native plants in creating climate resilient Maryland communities. So I'm just going to start by welcoming you here to University of Maryland Extension. If you're here in person or you're out there in Zoomlandia, I want to let everybody know that university programs, activities, and facilities are available to all without regard to race, color, sex, gender identity or expression, sexual orientation, marital status, age, national origin, political affiliation, physical or mental disability, religion, protected veteran status, genetic information, personal appearance, or any other legally protected class. You are welcome here, and I'm so glad that you chose to join us here this evening. So I started preparing for this with a little prompt, a little writing prompt for myself to get going, because I wanted to bring you something a little new tonight that I haven't shared. So I thought this would be a nice prompt for everyone. Just take a moment to think about, how did your relationship with native plants start? So if you want to share a few words in the chat box, or if you have anything in the room that you would like to share, was there one thing that really sparked your interest in native plants? Just in a few words. Your grandma's farm, I love it. Thank you.
Hiking in the Rocky Mountains.
Wonderful.
So we have a couple more. Watching birds in my backyard from Edward. Sandy says being a master gardener. Terry says her grandfather's influence. Mary said she moved to a downtown condo with no green space, so she started going on wildflower hikes. Jay says starting a container garden. Shelley says becoming a master gardener. Bonnie says nature walks with a neighbor as a child. Adrian says when they bought their house, there was a huge ailanthus tree in the backyard, and that was their intro to invasive versus native plants. Phyllis says Doug Talamy. We've got lots and lots of stuff in the chat here. We could keep going.
Okay, thank you. Well,
sorry if I missed you.
Well, I'm sure that you will think of even more as we go on. I'm going to start this evening first with a story, and then I'm going to do a little reading from the really exciting, this is the real exciting news, is the new Maryland Native Plant Guide for the Piedmont region. So I'll do a little reading from that because I have an article on that I'm really excited to share. And then I'll get into some of the really cool native plant updates for the Baywise program. So was thinking about how my relationship with native plants started. Like, how did I get here in this place, in the home horticulture division of University of Maryland Extension, Environment and Natural Resources? How did I get here? So I started really reflecting. And at first I was going to start by saying it really started in my college studies out in the Pacific Northwest back in 1990. Then I realized I'd have to go back farther than that. Probably back to the first time I looked at a bird through a broken half pair of binoculars and saw a fox sparrow, something like this, in southeastern Pennsylvania, doing its little characteristic hop scratch in the leaf litter. And I was instantly hooked on birding. I'd gone to college to study French literature. It changed everything. It changed all my plants. And I went down the path of ornithology after that. But then I realized it actually goes back way before that. It goes way back to a small patch of wild bleeding heart in the very unkempt back reaches of our my childhood backyard in Western Pennsylvania. Growing up against the wooden garage where my dad kept his old Vespa scooter, its weedier neighbor, the Queen Anne's lace, graced the retainer wall behind the post office parking lot right across from the county jail. I spent so much time back there just studying the plants, dissecting them with my fingernails, really mesmerized by the folklore of how all of these different plants got their name. And I just spent idle hours dreaming up more stories and painting on my arms with pokeberries and exploring all of the trees and playing among the roots, playing house among the roots of the maple trees. And what about the massive American elm? It towered like a giant parasol over the 700 block of 2nd Street in Little Beaver, Pennsylvania, in the upper Ohio River Valley. I mourn that tree's loss to this day. I feel sadness when I think about that tree. And the buckeyes that made perfect slingshot ammunition, and the sugar maples, the tree flares we played among, and we swept the floors with the little branches that would break off in thunderstorms. And that stickiness of that sugar maple sap that would collect the soot from the coal-fired power plant. Yet the trees somehow managed to shed knee-deep, beautiful blanket of red, green, and orange over our purple brick sidewalk. And I'd go fluff scuffing through that to kindergarten in knee-deep leaf litter. If anyone was going to ever rake that yard, it was going to be me, and that was just to jump in the leaves and make an even bigger mess. And this was way before leaf blowers ever arrived on the scene. So my family wasn't very concerned about yard maintenance at all at this time of their lives. They had bigger worries financially, physically, emotionally. My dad had had a really terrible accident, and my mom was kept really busy taking care of him and 3 kids, school-age kids inside. So early in life, I learned to escape the chaos of home and escape into nature and escape into the library. So as a result of all of this, our house had a less than conventional appearance, a somewhat neglected appearance, but it didn't bother me because it gave me so much to explore. So even though the neighbors were arching their eyebrows as they walked by in the morning on the way to church, they didn't see the moths and butterflies, the bees, wildflowers, the fireflies, the nuthatches, the chimney swifts, the nighthawks that emerged from this glorious mess the way I did. Our family let the blue mist flower run wild in the flower beds, and the mining bees were left to mind their own business, tunneling in our dirt yard. Not intentionally, out of any environmental leanings whatsoever, but just out of benign neglect. And if it wasn't for my family's lackadaisical attitude toward lawn care, I probably wouldn't be standing here before you as an ecologist today. So what I've described to you are my recollections from ages 4 to 6 that I've never written down before today. That's how strongly these stories have stayed with me, and these relationships with the plants that I considered my friends were. One of my even earlier memories was age 3, walking myself to the public library and demanding a library card. I rehearsed this because I needed that library card to get a book about owls. And I knew I had one shot to get through to the head librarian. Her name was Diane Wakefield. I'll never forget our librarian's name because she gave me that card at age 3. And I really considered that the birth of my environmental advocacy career. So I feel like it's fitting for me to make a profession at this point out of educating and encouraging people to keep a somewhat wilder and messier yard and return a little wildness to their corner of nature, to teach others how to understand and relate to the land and water as they that they steward as ecosystems, to connect with others who are as concerned about climate change, water quality, biodiversity, and environmental justice, and come to a mutual realization on a daily basis that our future and our fate is in our hands and right under our feet. So I was invited here tonight to talk about the Baywise program and the expanded role of native plants in our updated Baywise 2.0 checklist of actions, which is over there on the table if you'd like to grab yourself a copy on the way out. I'm honored that the founder of Baywise is here with us tonight, hopefully out there in Zoomlandia, Wanda McLaughlin. And I really hope to do her proud this evening and in all the following years that I'm involved with the program. And I want to give a shout out to Lisa Cooter too, who's out there, and the whole Maryland Native Plant Program for the amazing new Maryland Native Plant Guide for the Piedmont region that's going to be such an incredible reference and tool for us all. So in celebration of the publication of the guide, it's been released online. I thought I would start by reading a passage from my article in it. It's called Shrubs Are Unsung Native Plant Heroes. So this is from an earlier version of the article, so you don't have to try to read along. This is just like a little visual to show you how beautiful the book is. Shrubs may be the most undersung heroes of the native plant world across Maryland, unless, of course, you're a gray catbird, song sparrow, northern mockingbird, yellow-breasted chat, golden-winged warbler, indigo bunting, prairie warbler, eastern towhee, or one of the many other songbird species that sings their praises daily throughout the breeding season, emphatically declaring their shrubby territorial boundaries to defend against potential interlopers. There's an entire world of shrub nesting birds that's worth getting to know, and residential landscapes can play an essential role in sustaining the native shrub communities upon which these birds depend. Native shrubs are undoubtedly superior in the eyes of birds to invasive and ornamental plants at food sources and as nest sites. Unfortunately, step into any Maryland suburban or urban landscape and you will likely find yourself in a wide open space, excellent for archery or taking a long stroll in any direction, but devoid of the native shrubs that our wild birds desperately need for reproduction and survival. We can create beautiful, living landscapes to be enjoyed by humans and wildlife alike if we embrace a little more texture, complexity, and wildness in our residential and forest understories. Although early successional habitat, shrub-scrub habitat only makes up about 2.5% of the landscape in the Piedmont region, it's disproportionately important as bird habitat. Shrubs provide essential resources, including shelter, nest sites, nest material, and food in the form of berries, insects, and even nectar. In natural areas, patches of shrubby habitat are typically created by disturbances such as storms, wildfire, fire, or disease outbreaks, but human suppression of such events has resulted in a dominance of forest cover and canopy cover in natural areas with understories that are typically overbrowsed by white-tailed deer. Furthermore, sprawling suburban development has left us with over 1 million acres of green turf grass, carpeting that has little to offer most birds. In developed areas, the developer default options of turf grass dotted with ornamental shrubs has further reduced the availability of native shrubs as habitat for birds and beneficial insects that have co-evolved with them. Many songbirds are primarily insectivorous and feed their young soft-bodied insects, but they supplement those insect diets with berries whenever they can, especially in the fall and the winter, and on migration. Native berries tend to provide higher proportion of important nutrients for fueling up to overwinter or migrate than do invasive species. Research has shown that native berries provide essential lipids and sugars for long-distance migratory birds in the Catharus genus. That includes sweets and thrushes, hermit thrushes, and gray-cheeked thrushes. In contrast, non-native invasive berries don't offer the same nutrient profiles or berry at the right time to build up those fat reserves that fuel migration, and that birds help to spread these nuisance plants at the same time. Some berries of invasive plants, like this Nandia here, are toxic to birds, that particularly cedar waxwings that eat large volumes of berries. They produce alkaloids that produce poisonous hydrogen cyanide. So it's difficult to understand how these plants continue to be promoted for residential landscaping over much more nutrient-rich native shrubs that are all at once beautiful, nutritious, and versatile. Some excellent berrying shrub choices for birds in the Piedmont include black elderberry, low bush or high bush blueberry, hollies, native shrubs, native rubus, pardon me, native rubus. There are several species of native rubus. Wild roses, native wild roses, sumacs of several species, chokeberries, viburnums, wax myrtle. So try selecting a variety of shrubs and choose those shrubs that will bear fruit from early summer through fall. So think about the timing. And one of the things that's so beautiful about the guide is this berrying and bloom chart that actually shows you can plan for having berries throughout the breeding and migration season for our songbirds, and also shows the bloom timing. Then consider adding some evergreen species like native hollies, inkberry and American holly, sweet bay magnolia, wax myrtle, eastern red cedar, or even mountain laurel for winter color and bird shelter. The fuzzy fruits of native sumacs, they're actually enjoyed as a supplemental fall or emergency winter food source for a wide variety of berry-eating birds as well. That includes Easter bluebirds, cedar waxwings, northern cardinals, chickadees, nuthatches, northern bobwhite, and warblers. You're getting a lot of bonus birds in this talk that you're not going to get in the plant guide. I didn't ask permission. I just wanted to talk about birds. Okay, so, but we also want to think about the nectarivores. There are birds that specialize on nectar, like hummingbirds and orioles. So we can consider any one of our native azaleas, northern bush honeysuckles. Just avoid the invasive, non-native bush honeysuckles. They consume natural areas and rapidly suppress native biodiversity. Shrubs also provide excellent nest cover, but really rarely in isolation. So much of what we see as landscape design are isolated shrubs that are planted for decorative purposes, but that really do not provide the shrub cover and the nutrients. And we really need a lot more complex planting, dense planting, multiple individuals, and a nice mix of structure. Too much sameness makes it really, really easy for the predators to find the nest. A lot of birds won't even select an isolated exposed shrub for nesting because it's just too exposed. So try planting shrubs with a sturdy structure combined with some vining shrubs, some herbaceous plants, really a much more complex, complicated structure. That's where you're going to find your nesting songbirds. Finally, we can also put shrubs to work for us while they're providing bird habitat. There are so many shrubs that are beneficial for erosion control that are really, really important for soil condition and can be built into design for privacy screens and a number of other design purposes. So just about every other part of native plants living dead is used in one way or another as bird nesting habitat. So we think about leaf litter. It's important overwintering habitat for fireflies that whippoorwills depend on, forage on. They're nocturnal foragers and they forage on fireflies. Leaf litter also becomes a really important nest substrate for a number of ground nesting birds. Birds peel bark strips from wild grape and work that into their nest structure, including northern cardinals and mockingbirds. And a lot of birds use moss, dried grasses, twigs, all for nest material, including brown thrashers, red-eyed vireos. So this relationship between nesting birds and shrubs and native plants in general is so intricate when you start thinking about everything from what they eat to how they build their nests and how they conceal their nests. It's almost like each bird species has a bit of an architectural blueprint, but they're never going to put the nest in the exact same place twice. A cavity nester, yes, because they're more limited in where they can find the cavities, but shrub nesting birds are always needing to find a new location out with those predators, and they're always going to find a new location to build their nest. So providing abundant choice of nest sites is another really critical consideration. So in the book, The Service Fairy, Robin Wall Kimmerer, she writes about the reciprocity of relationships as a central organizing theme in nature. She describes a seemingly utopian gift economy of sorts, one that's entirely realistically grounded in a web of mutually beneficial relationships between plants and animals. She writes, climate catastrophe and biodiversity loss are the consequences of unrestrained taking by humans. Might cultivation of gratitude be part of the solution? The myriad intricate relationships among birds and native plants is really, really, truly astounding to contemplate. I never get tired of it. From their food sources to the shelter, nest material, nest sites. All of these relationships have fueled my fascination with native plants since the early 1990s. So this may all seem really obvious for people who are steeped in bird culture and bird lore, but for those who ask why landscape with native plants, I often think there are so many reasons where in the world to start. First, water quality. Water quality is the founding organizing principle and goal of the Baywise program, as well as biodiversity. But we now have the urgent issue of climate change and the need to address climate resilience and also documented extreme biodiversity declines, even in the 21st century. So we've taken a look at the program, we've evaluated all of the best practices, and we're keeping all of those awesome core water quality practices, but put it all through the lens of climate change, all through the lens of flood and drought extremes. And where could we also boost our attention to native biodiversity and begin to address biodiversity declines in a meaningful way on residential landscapes? So of course, botanists don't need to be told the intrinsic value of native plants, but when you start thinking about the millions of years of coevolution with insects, with birds, we realize we're really talking about relationships, a whole set of relationships, but also services that come back to humans that we can also benefit from. So our primary focus is the Chesapeake Bay watershed in the Baywise program. We also have a Waterwise program in far western Maryland. So if you are in the farthest western reaches of Garrett County, we have a Waterwise program, and it corresponds to the Baywise program for your region. But Chesapeake Bay is the largest estuary in the United States. It's critically important ecologically and economically. And there are only two border states to the Chesapeake Bay, Maryland and Virginia. And proportionally, Maryland is, you could argue that it's the most coastal state in the US because of the highest proportion of coastline to landmass in all of the states. Overall water quality is improving, but it received a C+ in the last water quality report that UMC's put out. And there are still quite a few impaired watersheds in Maryland, Chesapeake Bay watersheds. Overall, the Eastern Shore is improving, but water quality on the upper Western Shore is declining. So there are still some significant water quality challenges, some of which come from residential landscapes. But those highest ecological scores came from those areas with the highest tree cover, the lowest agriculture, and the lowest development. So you can see that those ecosystems have a really important role to play in water filtration, capturing and slowing stormwater runoff, while residential landscapes continue to contribute to water pollution. And looking at the climate forecasts, the climate trends that we're experiencing firsthand now in Maryland, they include increasing average temperatures, increasingly heavy precipitation events, more intense storms, as well as drought and sea level rise. So these are all issues that we're seeking to address. And there are practices throughout the Baywise checklist of actions that address climate resilience, building community resilience through peer education and community building, as well as mitigation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and adaptation, that process of adapting to new climate conditions in order to reduce risk. Let's take a look at the biodiversity component of it. It's been documented that butterfly populations have declined by 22% in the last 2 decades in the US. Nearly 3 billion breeding birds have been lost in the Americas since 1970. Blue crabs in Maryland and Virginia are at the second lowest point in history. And the oyster population has tripled to 12 billion oysters over the past 20 years, but that's still 1 to 2% of the historic population of oysters. So this all gives us sort of the foundation and the motivation and the impetus for doing what we're doing. So those are the three areas in the area of overlap right in the center between amongst water quality, biodiversity, climate resilience. That's where we seek to focus our actions through promoting ecological landscaping practices. So we have reorganized the checklist around 8 essential habits. We're really focusing on this, on environmental behavior change, really clear actions people know what they need to do and why it's beneficial. We're focusing on cultivating healthy soils, capturing and using precipitation where it falls, planting and conserving native plants, and we'll get into the expanded components of that section, protecting pollinators and beneficial insects, reducing hazards to fish and wildlife in the process, shrinking our lawn footprint, protecting our waterways and shorelines, and educating friends, family, and neighbors about ecological landscaping practices. So just a brief snapshot of the numbers. This is the University of Maryland Extension Baywise program. It's a Master Gardener program, and we are nearing 30 years. So this program's been in place for 30 years, and over 3,000 landscapes have been certified. Client landscapes have been certified. Over 300 non-residential landscapes certified. So this is not just a backyard certification program. This includes parks, libraries, community spaces, community gardens. There are 772 demonstration sites that people can go visit to see examples of ecological landscaping with native plants in practice. And there are 223 demonstration sites still being actively maintained by master gardeners. So I talked a little bit about the checklist. Originally, the program had a checklist that was known as the yardstick, and the little slogan was, "How does your yard measure up?" But like I said, the program rapidly grew beyond yards. It's not just about yards. We're looking at communities, HOAs, public lands, parks. But I want to acknowledge my co-authors, Wanda McLaughlin, and give her credit for her years of dedication and vision in starting the program. Lisa Cooter with the Maryland Native Plants Program, who really contributed to the native plants section, and Maddie Potter on the beneficial insects. So I'm just going to go over a little bit about what these keystone habits are and what a keystone habit is. It's really a small behavior change that can have an outsized impact on watershed health. Habit number 1 is about recycling organic yard and kitchen waste on site. This has always been a component of Baywise, but we added some more practices and we provided more resources. But this is all about using organic materials to increase soil organic matter, not just for gardening purposes, but to start with increasing biodiversity in the soil, which is really the foundation of the food web. And soil organic matter also retains a lot more water. So it's also a component of stormwater absorption, reducing the amount of stormwater running off, therefore reducing water pollution and flooding. So we know that leaving leaf litter increases soil organic matter. So for this season, for fall, this is one of the most powerful things that we could be encouraging people to do. I know we say it a lot, leave the leaves. I still don't see it a lot. So this is the cheapest, easiest, cost-effective way that we can begin to boost biodiversity and absorb more stormwater. So it reduces soil compaction, it gives you better growing substrate, we get increased aeration and soil permeability from all the burrowing insects and wildlife. And then you can see it kicking off this food web of fireflies, whippoorwills, and all of the other species that depend on those terrestrial insects. Habit 2 is about capturing and using precipitation where it falls through a variety of strategies. We've got a lot of resources in the booklet, and there is a digital PDF version of this with active hyperlinks where you can just click and go right to the resources. But this is all about retaining and filtering stormwater on site to improve water quality and reduce local flooding, erosion, and drought impacts. And a lot of these practices, particularly the native plant beds, the conservation landscaping, the rain gardens, all entail working and emphasize working with native plants. So a few different rain barrels from around Maryland, from different travels around Maryland in our field trainings, our Baywise field trainings. And this is a case study of a really beautiful rain garden. Elaine Howman submitted this. She's one of our Baywise master gardeners. But this rain garden holds thousands of gallons of water. I'm not going to say the exact amount, but you can see they had a lot of stormwater running across the property from properties upslope. And they worked with Watershed Stewards Academy and Chesapeake Bay landscape professionals to put in a really nicely designed rain garden using native plants. And that has solved the flooding issues on their property. And this is another example of using native plants in stormwater management. This is a tiered garden that is designed to capture stormwater runoff from a municipal parking lot. And this garden is planted and tended by Baywise master gardeners. This was right after the planting, and then that's just this spring. So it's already really filled out, and they're making great use of that stormwater and reducing the flooding downslope. And now let's get to the juicy part, planting and conserving a wide variety of native plants. So this section is all focusing on designing and managing landscapes using native plants for ecosystem services, biodiversity, and habitat value. And it's all about making ecologically conscious planting decisions. So that might seem simple, but if we're going about it from that sort of decorative design approach, we're going to be missing a lot of the habitat value that we could be having. So we broke it down into several sections, and I'll just go through what those sections are. First is a careful assessment of ecological site conditions so that people understand, what conditions are they working with? The soil type, sun, shade, water flow, salt exposure. What are the existing plants that are already there? And getting familiar with the surrounding ecosystem so that people can understand what plants might be appropriate, what native plants might actually be appropriate and thrive and survive on the site. That entails conducting soil tests, selecting the right suitable native plants. There might be some trial and error there. Also thinking about the biology and the reproduction of the plants. I think but the problem is when we're going about this with a sort of decorator, designer mentality, people tend to forget that plants are living organisms that have a need to reproduce. So really learning a little bit about the reproductive biology of the plants to make sure they have that opportunity to reproduce and spread. And then identify and conserve native plants where they occur. So that's a little mapping activity and really getting familiar with what native plants you have out there already. Or what seeds might be in the seed bed. You never know what might come up if you just give it a chance and do a little weeding. So we're really focusing too on designing for habitat and strategies that people can use native plants to design for habitat. So that includes creating habitat layers, planting evergreens where possible. And evergreens could mean ground cover, ferns, shrubs, trees, vines. There's such a variety of what constitutes evergreens. Planting and protecting those keystone tree species. And we talked about the native bearing shrubs. Now there's a great table and there's a whole resource in the Maryland Native Plant Guide of native bearing shrubs. And I do believe that there are guides coming for Western Maryland and Eastern Maryland too. But I think you'll still enjoy the Piedmont Guide, and it'll give you ideas, to get started and looking into what's possible in the Western Eastern regions. We also talk about encouraging native understory in wooded areas and conserving those tree cavities and snags. So I talked a lot about shrubs, but tree cavities and snags also offer really, really important habitat for cavity nesting bird species. So you're probably familiar with some of those, but nuthatches, woodpeckers, even some owls will use tree cavities. And so having roosting sites in the winter, nesting sites in the summer. So conserving those tree cavities and snags wherever it's safe to do so. And then there's a section now on designing for ecosystem services in ways that people can use native plants to solve some of their problems, some of their design dilemmas, whether it is stormwater management, erosion, planting for windbreaks, planting for shade, different ways that people can put native plants to use in service of their landscape design needs. And the Water Wisely section, this has always been part of Baywise, but we are just grouping this together in service to native plant conservation, using collected rainwater wherever possible to water native plants. So I have a system here that I set up using my rain barrel and then running a soaker hose downslope, and I'm watering my high bush blueberry hedgerow, and then I have a pollinator garden that I'm watering with the rain barrel. So that's just one example of how you can use collected rainwater to water some of your native plants. And then water only with at sites of drought stress, using the soaker hose or drip irrigation where possible, watering at the base of native plants. We say this and I think everybody knows it, but I still see, I'm driving to work, people like watering the plants. They're just like, right, like running the hose over the top of the plants. So it's really a lot better for the native plants to be watered at the base if possible, early in the day, and keeping the watering separate from the lawn and the ornamental plants, because ideally we want those native plant roots to go deep. We don't want to overwater them. And then mindful mulching. This is a topic I love, but talking about using organic mulch materials, thin layer of mulch, keeping that mulch back away from woody stems and trunks, allowing trees to self-mulch with their own leaves. A lot of people might know about this already. Maybe everybody here already practices ecological landscaping, but we have master gardeners who are out there tasked with teaching these new practices and these new habits to the general public that have grown up and adopted habits that are really contrary to ecological management. So it's one thing to know, like, oh, this is a good thing to use organic mulch and avoid the mulch volcanoes, but try teaching that to someone else and convincing somebody else that that's, even though you see that everywhere, that's really not the best way to do it if you really want to conserve your mature keystone trees. So that's the challenge. It's not just about what should people do, it's how do we change habits? How do we encourage people to do things an entirely different way? Because even when it may be cheaper and less work, it's a culture. There are a lot of deep cultural practices and memories. Like we just talked about all of our memories associated with native plants. People have memories associated with their lawns or a particular type of landscaping. So we talk a lot about how to communicate these new ways of doing things in a way that people will hopefully be receptive. The next section is on practicing proper native tree care. This is a whole new section on proper caring for the tree roots and tree flares, proper planting soft landing beds under those keystone tree species. So using a green mulch layer and protecting and transplanting those native seedlings and saplings whenever possible. This is from a planting day that Lisa Kuda organized, planting native shrubs out here at Summer at Clarksville, and my son came out to volunteer. So we're trimming back, we're doing some bare root planting and trimming back some of those roots. And then, of course, we had to have an invasive plant section in the native plant section, because we're not going to have a lot of success with our native plants if we don't identify and get on top of those invasive non-native species. So I spent a really nice afternoon in the field with Judy, watching her strategy, and she doesn't let anything get by her. She pounces as soon as she sees it. I mean, it was gold standard. But we do have resources now here in the checklist about proper disposal of invasive plants, how to avoid inadvertently planting invasive plants, and what to do with those invasive plants once you remove them. The bigger concern is those plants that reproduce vegetatively, or making sure that, porcelain berry, for example, we get it up before the birds can spread the berries everywhere. And then replanting densely with assertive native plants. Extension has a whole resource on suggested assertive plants that you could use to replace your invasive once you do get them out. And then if you live adjacent to woodlands or forests, you have the opportunity to become a woodland steward. We've got a woods in your backyard assessment, a woods in your backyard course. If you steward 10 acres or more of woodlands, it's recommended to contact Maryland DNR for a forest stewardship plan. And as those of us who love native plants understand, hopefully, the importance of regulating female deer populations because of their impact, their overbrowsing impact on the understory. Habit 4 is a lot of common sense but important practices for protecting pollinators and beneficial insects. Just reminding people that insects provide a lot of ecosystem services that they might not be thinking about in their daily life, but that we really directly depend on to survive, like pollination, pest control, decomposition, nutrient cycling, and nutrition for wildlife. And this is a really nice case study. This is actually connected to that tiered stormwater garden. They started small with a pollinator garden. Pretty soon they're putting in tiered stormwater gardens. So this is in Calvert County in Prince Frederick. So this is also from Karen Anderson and Melanie Crowder. So they're two of our Baywise master gardeners. But they've been maintaining this native pollinator garden for 12 years. And this is a beautiful example of a community pollinator garden. This is in Prince George's County in Brentwood. So there was a volunteer planting day, and I think this was actually fairly recent, a year or two ago that they planted. But Jody Bader said us this story that she consulted with them. She led the volunteer planting effort. But now it's just absolutely gorgeous with really artistic signage showing the relationship between the insects and the birds. And this is just such a lovely oasis on a hot day in this little urban community. And it's just full of blooming pollinator plants. So habit 5 is really focused on reducing hazards to fish and wildlife, because while we're putting in, all of this habitat, we're planting native plants, we're going to be attracting wildlife into areas that are full of hazards, whether it's windows, cars, cats. We wanted to provide resources to people how they could lessen the impact on Maryland's wildlife. And shrinking your lawn footprint. So this is really all about reducing the environmental impact of the lawn. Yes, it's about reducing the lawn area, but it's also reducing the runoff. It's reducing the amount of chemicals that we're putting into the environment and switching over to electric lawn equipment. Lots of different ways that if people can properly manage their lawn, they may be less likely to throw more chemicals and water after the wrong problems. So sustainable lawn care is still a really, really important part of Baywise. And this is just a little example of part of my own lawn conversion experience. I just started this last fall, actually. So I wanted to try out the paper landscape fabric. It's like organic paper, and put a bunch of plants in. I've got prairie drop seed and some brown-eyed Susans and some of my favorites, some slender goldenrod. Then I got a hold of a whole bunch of Herrick's woody eyes, the wood sedge, and just went kind of crazy with that. The paper, after a while, like after a few really heavy rainstorms, kept wanting to wash away and tear and clog up the culvert. So I put a couple layers of coir fabric down. And this is really kind of nice, like industry standard coir fabric, and just nailed it down with landscaping, the staples, right? It's still there, but you don't see it anymore because this is what we have now. So this was spring. So I was able to use all of my neighbors' stormwater from 6 properties upslope that flows across our property to nurture my native pollinator garden. And I got a lot of funny looks when I was planting, I was putting the paper down, and now I have people stop and like, I come to see your garden every day. I love your native plants. I'm like, oh, wow, you realized, okay, this is really, really cool. So I'm really looking forward to seeing these plants expand and just continuing to add. But I even had a mining bee colony just come set up shop this spring, and I think it was in June. It's like, wow, so if you build it, they really will come. I've got song sparrows in there and a whole variety of different pollinators. Habit 7 is about protecting our waterways and shorelines, and I'll just point out the ones that are particularly related to native plants. One is on planting native plant buffers along waterways, and also opting for natural or green living shoreline management wherever possible. And so this is an example from Harford County, from our Harford County extension, where they have a really elaborate stormwater management system. They do use some riprap, but there's a lot of native plants they've incorporated into it. And just to look at like the status of our riparian forests, and riparian systems have a really important role to play on to prevent stream bank erosion, supporting insect and bird populations, shading water, keeping water temperatures cooler. But these areas in red on the map here, those are areas that were mapped to be missing 50 to 100% of the riparian forest. So you can see, particularly in central Maryland, it's a really big problem, but also in the eastern shore. And then finally, we have a new section on the importance of educating friends, family, and neighbors about baywise practices, because our neighbors really are the best messengers. Our friends are neighbors. People want to do something. They want to be part of the solution, but at the same time, it's kind of hard to do something, to break away and do something completely different from what your neighbors are doing. So building those networks, building those community networks, spreading the word, explaining why we're doing it this way. We wanted to award points for that. So we built that into the scoring system. And just a few different ways. We've got some amazing social media going on. And some of this is social media coming from our master gardeners and coming from Extension. But some of this is just organic, coming up from people that are just so happy about their Baywise visit or their new certification. They're posting in social media groups that have 15, 16,000 people in them. So it's really, really powerful when people see how, you know, it's a positive experience, how happy they are and the benefits that they're reaping from it. So here's another example of getting the word out. Calvert County has a whole garden tour map, a Baywise garden tour map. This is available online. There are so many amazing sites to see in Calvert County. This would be a really amazing day trip to go there and see some of these Baywise sites. My favorite of all time is Flag Ponds, and you can actually go fossil hunting there too. But Flag Ponds is a Baywise site. How exciting is that? And here's another example. This is a library rain garden in Queen Anne's County. So you can see it was under construction on the left side and then top left. And then you can see the rain garden in action, how much stormwater that rain garden is actually taking on, and the native plants that are thriving there in the garden. So these are real community solutions that are solving actual real community flooding problems and incorporating native plants and then educating people. These are places that are community hubs that so many people can come to and learn about these practices and learn about these plants. And they actually have this really beautiful river walk, and they have a whole diagram. You can see the cross-section diagram of a rain garden and the deep native plant roots, you know, and the role that the native plants play in absorbing the stormwater. So what an incredible educational outreach opportunity that is. So just a super quick little thing. I'm not going to get into like the nitty-gritty details. It's really very simple. We're just adding up the number of actions in each of those habits. We encourage people to do a few things in each habit category, but there are a lot of actions. Nobody's expected to do 100% of them. But we want it to be there's something for everyone, whether you live in an apartment and you're container gardening or you have a larger piece of land. There's something for everybody in here. So each action is worth 3 points, representing water quality, climate resilience, and biodiversity benefits. We ask people to make some effort, do some homework, put some effort in before they have a Baywise Master Gardener come out. So they need to actually score some points, 80 to 100, to qualify for a site visit. And then the Baywise Master Gardeners come out and evaluate, and if all goes well, do the certification. So if you're interested in becoming Baywise certified, you can pick up the booklet here. We also have the online digital version. Just Google Maryland Living Landscape Symmetric, and you can use the digital online version and have all of the links to all of the resources we provide. And there's a very simple application process. You just give your contact information. Are you interested in a sign or a certificate, and mail it into your extension office or your Baywise chairs. All of the contact information is on our website. There's also contact information in the booklet. And I just wanted to end on this super positive note because this is what gets me out of bed every morning is these spaces and like the joy that this program is bringing people, connecting with new people, and also just having, opportunity to celebrate their accomplishments. We have one of our field trainings. This is our Baltimore City field training on the right. It's Silburn Arboretum. Silburn actually is a Baywise certified site. So this was our summer field training in July. And then this is Don and Sally Callahan. They just recently had their yard certified. They're really, really involved naturalists involved with the Gunpowder Watershed Conservancy. And they just had their yard certified. I think this was just a couple weeks ago, Baltimore County. So if you have any questions or comments for me, we have a few minutes to take questions or field comments, I think. But here's also my contact information at the bottom. Thank you so much.
I was wondering if you have any suggestions for dealing with excessively large numbers of deer. Because I will say that every native plant that I have in my yard that I've tried to put in there over the years, I get not a single flower if the plant even survives.
Yeah. Yeah.
As we've had as many as 27 deer in the yard at a time. We have a good 10 to 15 that go through every day.
Yeah. Well, there are some options. I don't have the solution. It's a matter of trying different things, and also depends on your budget. There's a certain amount of advocacy for deer population regulation. And that's not my role. I'm an educator, but there's a need for that and to support deer hunting efforts. So there's people that are also opposed to that and find that problematic. So I can't tell people how to think that way, but if you're really concerned about deer overpopulation, that's one path.
I think it's the houses are close enough together that it's hard to find space to put hunters.
Yeah.
And the nearest county area has the highest levels in the county. They counted 197 deer per square mile.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't know that they're hunting out there, but the farm areas around, they are just not so many, not nearly enough.
So, one option is fencing. At least even if starting with small areas that you want to get some plant populations established. There are native plants with properties like that are fuzzy, thorny, that are super aromatic. So to get them established, if you can use some fencing, but then offer something that's more palatable, that's what I do. Because I think we have the same deer herd. We probably do. I'm in Montgomery County. We got like a lot of deer. Okay. So that ditch that bioswale that I planted, I put so many things in there that just got nibbled down. And I just realized if I could have some sacrificial hostas, I have a sacrificial red bud that's stump sprouting, and they prefer that to all of these prickly rattlesnake masters and all the other stuff that I have growing in there. They don't really like the goldenrod. This time I planted really densely. I left something for the deer that was really accessible. They didn't touch it. And this was not my first attempt, but you saw it blooming. So I was like, I got kind of strategic. I was like, I'm just going to have to be okay. Like I almost cut the red bud down because it had a little problem. I was like, why don't I just let it stump sprout for the deer? That was my magic solution. So give them something that they can eat that's preferable, and then guard your, if you have to fence it or whatever you need to do, get little patches established at a time of the natives. You might talk a little bit about your deer fence experience, because you have a really impressive deer fence, Judy. How'd you get that deer fence?
I just simply got very frustrated. The final straw was the 3 elderberry that I planted and got eaten down to the ground.
Yeah.
And I just said, I'm going to put in a fence.
Yeah. I had pussy willows that I planted 3 or 4, and they just kept getting nibbled back, and I just kept taking they would snip them. So I would take the twigs and put them back in, and just kept putting them back in, and finally they're taking. But it's just there has to sort of like a persistence. We can't get like super precious about any one plant either. There's trial and error involved.
And even my fence, Occasionally someone will come by and leave my gate open, and
no.
then the deer go to town.
Yeah, I mean, I want to let the foxes in. I don't want the deer in, but I do want the foxes in to take the, to keep the mice down and.
I have a solution that's helped. There's nothing that's going to do it completely, but I have little bottles of homemade deer off with
Yeah.
holes in the top, and I hang them in each plant
Okay,
to paint. But it's a lot easier than spraying it every time it rains.
yeah, I
And you-
quickly determined spraying every time it rains wasn't gonna happen.
I use old spice bottles because they already have holes in them.
That's a good idea.
But I did have a question. Thank you very much, by the way. Lovely program, lovely presentation, really amazing. So
Thank
that's
you.
great. Does the Bay Wise program or other things have help for private homes to remove invasives? So I have two things. I have some big Paulownia trees, the princess trees that, what am I going to do with them? But I've also had neighbors or other people say they were, having trouble just physically removing some of the vases. Is there any programs out there that actually do that for homeowners?
So Baywise is more of an educational program. So like the master gardeners won't go out and actually fix anything or solve your problems except to help you find resources or connect you with professionals or resources in your county, that sort of thing. So it's more of like an educational effort, but yeah, hopefully you can find that those people to help. Chesapeake Bay Landscape Professionals, start there. Check the directory.
This is maybe less of a question, but I just want to put in a thought about Baywise. I'm a native plant consultant in my community, and I have pointed people to Baywise for many years in part because it covers more domains of things than just I do in more of a gardening focus. It's covering a broader scale. I don't give people a lot of like turf grass advice, for instance, but it's in Baywise. And I am really impressed with the changes because, I mean, I love the old yardstick and everything, but there's a resource next to each item, which is not, I don't believe was the case prior. And certainly in the area of native plants, in the area of native gardening, it wasn't at the level of detail where I could just hand that to somebody and say, go do it. And I would trust that they would get all the lessons they need. A lot of what I'm telling people every single week is all right now in the book, and I can basically give it to them as a workbook and say, and if you do the workbook, you'll get a cool sign. And that's part two. Is I have been amazed by how much people need permission to do this. It is still transgressive as a practice to plant native plants, and having the government train people to come out and give you a certification and say you're doing a good job and all your neighbors should know it is unbelievably powerful. So I just want to emphasize to anybody on here who hasn't participated in it or recommended it to their community groups, it's super valuable. So
yeah, and sort of the framing in our field trainings, we talk about going out not as like an inspector. We don't play a regulatory role of any kind. Going out to celebrate accomplishments, identify opportunities, and work with the resident to identify next steps that will work for them and provide resources, educational resources. So that's what our program does. So thank you for those comments.
To build on the conversation that this gentleman started about communities, will you be expanding the program beyond the homeowner lawn and maybe to the open space, the community areas? For example, I live in a townhouse community, so I have a limited yard.
Yeah.
But if the open space, everybody cooperates and.
Yeah, and that's part of the name change. Not that we wouldn't have certified community spaces, but it's a landscape program. So that's exactly the direction we want to continue going, is working with HOAs, serving not just, all the language about home ownership is not even in the new version because it's not just meant to address homeowners. We want to address renters as well and communities and, municipal entities. So yeah, absolutely. That's how we're going to make transformational change.
Stacy, wanted to say thank you for your presentation. That was excellent tonight.
Thank you.
I really appreciated your statement that if homeowners had more knowledge in terms of cultural turf grass care,
Yeah.
that would eliminate the need for many chemical inputs. In regard to leaving the leaves, and we've been saying this for years, and we're always hoping it catches on. As a landscaper, it's, I think one of the biggest hurdles is making it attractive. So not everyone has killed their lawn. They don't have the pollinator patch in the front yard or the sign. They still have their Kentucky bluegrass, tall fescue, their hydrangeas, boxwoods. But in that sense, there is a country club out in Washington County, Fountainhead Country Club. Years ago, I visited, and one of the things that took me by surprise was that they did not use hardwood mulching. They used their leaves in the beds, using the leaves as mulch. Now, it did appear that they had mixed in compost with the leaf litter, and I'm sure that brought weight to the leaves. However, the other, thing to this is, well, a lot of lawns have a lot of mature trees. There could be mature oaks, mature maples. And so the mulch beds, they're going to be limited on the property compared to the load of leaf litter that is dropped. So in that regard, now we're looking at mowing. And my question is, we have insects that lay eggs on the leaves. We've already put the leaves in our mulch beds. It can't get any higher. So the next step, in my opinion, would be mowing, and mowing the leaves as long as you're mowing and the level of the leaves does not exceed the height of the crown of the grass plant, you can have a successful lawn in that aspect. But what would be the repercussions if we were to mulch the leaves into the lawn? Are we doing a lot of harm? Is it not worth it? Or is it okay?
Yeah, we do a whole like shrink your lawn footprint training, and that's part of it is that there are a number of different ways to leave the leaves. So as many that you can leave whole as possible, non-diseased leaves by raking them into beds or, having a designated wild corner. But to that point where you're maxed out, you still have leaves. If you, if you can mow them quickly, like soon after they fall, not leaving them there, become established habitat. But then at least then it becomes part of the soil organic matter. You're putting those nutrients back into the soil and nourishing that tree the way it was meant to be. Right? Yeah, thank you. Lots of different ways to leave the leaves.
So we do have a couple of questions in the chat. Heidi Pringle says that she has original invasive ornamentals and a lot of natives. Can they still be registered baywise?
So that's a great question. We are not looking for 100% of any one thing, but that you are working actively on removing, managing, replacing, and showing actual progress, showing a plan, showing that effort. We don't want people to feel like they have to be 100%, but to understand these are living landscapes for a reason. There's always going to be maintenance. There's always going to be a next step. So, I would say that, as long as you're making that effort and you're working on replacing with natives and not putting new invasives in, definitely getting on top of anything that is invasive. We're not going to, I don't think that we ever have been or ever would be 100% anti-ornamentals, but it's really identifying those ones that are aggressively invasive and detrimental to natural areas that we want to see that there's a solid management plan on that.
We have some discussion in the chat about ways to get deer to not browse plants. So
let's hear it.
So Dawn says that she plants mountain mint around the shrubs deer like because the deer dislike aromatic plants.
Mm-hmm.
Jim said a 4-foot turkey wire fence will protect most garden areas. And that he had success with a 5-acre reforestation area with 2 4-foot fences 10 feet apart, and deer never went into the reforested area.
Wow, that's dedication, but also very impressive. Thank you for sharing that.
So we have another question from Marla, who said that she joined late, and the answer to this, I'm sure, is yes. But she says that she's in Rockville, and she asks, "Can I work towards Baywide certification for her yard?"
Yes, you can. You may. We encourage you to. So you can go online and you can find the Maryland Living Landscapes metric. on the extension website now. So just put Maryland Living Landscape Symmetric. I'm sorry, I don't have the link handy right at the moment. But it will take you right to the checklist and you can download that PDF and start filling it out. It's fillable.
We have a couple other comments about leaf litter and stuff like that. Jim also says that he finds that grinding dry leaves reduces them to a point that they don't blow off and they compost faster.
Okay.
And then
Kind of a counterpart to grass cycling too. Do we all know about grass cycling? So it's just adapting your mower to chop the grass clippings up into little bits that break down really fast. And it just is instant fertilizer for the lawn.
this question is a little bit off topic, possibly, but might be useful to address. Chris asks, how do you get rid of really difficult invasive plants like lesser celandine? It seems impossible.
Dig it up, double bag it. I learned that from Judy. Judy, do you have anything to add? Dig it up while it's young, while it's small, early in the season.
If you have a single plant of lesser celandine, it can be dug up, and make sure you get all the soil because you want to get the little bulblets. But if you've got a huge infestation, then it can be very hard to deal with that, except with, I'm afraid to say, except with pesticide, herbicide. There are people looking into superheated steam. That's a possibility. And then if something is growing in say a concrete walkway, you can actually use specially designed fire. What was this?
A flamethrower.
Yes, a flamethrower. Oh my gosh. But that's only for in walkways and first year growth or annuals. But in many cases, I do have to say, if you've got like an acre of lesser celandine, there's just no way that you can get rid of it without herbicide at this point.
Yeah, there's also a very short herbicide window for less than celandine.
Yeah, you need to address lesser celandine, ideally when it's just started to flower. But basically March, April is the best time to get rid of lesser celandine. I also
There
want
are a
to
lot
add,
of extension resources too on invasive management and disposal. So
yes,
just
look
wanna
at the
put that plug in
extension
there.
resources.
Lots of extension resources.
Now, I want to make a comment here. We're talking very much here about landscaped areas. And what's the Maryland Native Plant Society doing? Promoting landscaped areas like pet lawn, pet landscaping. The reason is because if we can only conserve the areas that are already natural, we will lose our native species, our native plants, our native beneficial insects, other animals, the microbes, we will lose them. We need to have our landscapings that are landscaping that is managed also to have native plants. And that's why Baywise is so important in encouraging these various practices, because I believe it's 40% of all the land in the eastern US is covered with lawns. If we can convert a certain percentage of that to native plants, that will go a very far distance in preserving our biodiversity.
And on the flip side of that, if we don't have residents who are knowledgeable about invasive plants and they continue to plant them or mismanage them, how can we maintain quality and biodiversity in our natural areas? And that's exactly what I'm going to talk about tomorrow morning at the DNR Outdoor Recreation Summit. We have a whole panel on reducing the spread of invasive plants between natural areas and residential areas. So hopefully through this effort, we're also educating people about how they can reduce the impact of invasives on natural areas. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight.
Well, thank
you
you
for the
very
invitation.
much, Stacy. Wonderful presentation.
You're very
Again,
welcome.
very important in terms of how we're going to be conserving our natural areas.
And there's so much we can do.
Yes.
There's so much we can do.